I've never liked flying, but business forces me into the air more often than I'd like. This particular flight was supposed to be routine, Chicago to Denver, mid-afternoon. Nothing remarkable. The kind of flight where you distract yourself with a book, endure the cramped seat, and count down the hours. But nothing about this flight was routine. Nothing. The first sign came as I boarded. I was late, one of the last passengers to step down the jet bridge. Everyone else was already buckled in, with their bags shoved into overhead bins, the usual restless shuffle. My seat was near the back, row 27 by the window. As I made my way down the narrow aisle, I noticed the silence, just the dull hum of ventilation. Every face I passed was pale, blank, and still, as if they'd been carved in wax. No one looked at me, not one. I slid into my seat beside an empty aisle chair. The man in the row ahead of me had his head tilted against the window with his eyes closed, but his skin looked wrong, like paper stretched too thin. His lips were tinged blue. I thought maybe he was asleep, or maybe even sick, but something in me recoiled. I couldn't bring myself to tap his shoulder. The plane pushed back, taxied, and lifted. The seatbelt sign dinged, but no one moved. No one ordered drinks. No one pulled out a laptop. The flight attendants were absent. I kept waiting for the usual announcements and the cheerful reminders about turbulence, but the speakers remained dead. An hour in, the sky outside had turned a heavy shade of gray, the clouds too dense to see through. It wasn't stormy, but the light seemed drained. The world outside looked like old metal, corroded and colorless. I turned back, and that's when I realized the man in front of me wasn't breathing. His chest didn't rise and fall. He was utterly still. I told myself I was imagining it, that maybe I couldn't see from this angle, but when I leaned sideways to check, I saw it clearly. His skin had taken on that unmistakable waxy sheen. He was dead. I twisted around to see if anyone else had noticed, but the rows around me were worse. A woman in a business suit slumped forward, hair hiding her face, hands curled stiffly on her lap. A teenager with headphones sat rigid, jaw locked with eyes staring through me. Every passenger I could see was silent and unmoving. I stood up fast, heart hammering, and a flight attendant appeared, materializing from the front of the plane as if she'd stepped out of the wall. She was tall, her uniform immaculate, with a smile frozen in place like a doll's. Her eyes were the wrong shade of gray, too flat, too still.
"Sir, please return to your seat,"
she said softly. "There are dead people here," I stammered. "These passengers, they're not breathing." Her smile didn't falter.
"Everyone is where they should be. Please return to your seat."
I didn't move. I couldn't. My knees locked as my panic spiraled. That's when the man in the aisle across from me turned his head. Not a normal turn, but a slow, grinding rotation, and as his eyes found mine, I saw empty sockets where pupils should have been. His mouth opened wider than it should have, skin tearing at the corners, and a sound leaked out. A low hiss, like air escaping a pressurized cabin. I stumbled back into my seat, pressing against the window as if I could melt through it. The flight attendant glided closer, tilting her head with mechanical grace.
"You don't belong here yet."
The lights flickered, and outside the window something moved against the clouds. Dark shapes, like other planes flying parallel, impossibly close. One tilted toward us, and I saw inside. Rows of passengers, all lifeless, heads lolled, staring forward in perfect unison. I squeezed my eyes shut, but when I opened them, the cabin was darker and the air colder. Frost rimmed the overhead vents. The dead man in front of me slowly turned his head, tendons snapping, until his face pressed flat against the glass of the window, his eyes, glazed and colorless, locked with mine through the reflection. I tried to stand again, but my body refused. My limbs felt pinned as if restrained by unseen hands. The intercom crackled to life, filled with static, then a voice, hollow and wrong. This is your final descent. Thank you for flying with us. We hope you enjoyed your passage." The plane tilted downward. The cabin shook violently, but none of the passengers reacted. Their heads lolled, spines bending, bodies twisting in grotesque unison as though tethered by invisible strings. The flight attendant braced herself against my seat, her face inches from mine.
You don't belong here yet.
There was a sudden wrenching, a scream of metal, and the entire cabin blurred into black. I woke in my own bed. That's the part that should comfort me, but it doesn't. Because on my nightstand lay the boarding pass from that flight. Flight 237 Chicago to Denver. The date printed across it is tomorrow. I hadn't slept a wink on the plane. The hum of the engines and the steady pulse of the cabin lights made it impossible to settle. My flight was supposed to be long, but I'd expected rest, not this. Across the aisle he was there, the smiling passenger. I noticed him as soon as I boarded. He was an unremarkable man, middle-aged, wearing a dark blue blazer that might have been a little too formal for economy class, but it was the smile that caught me. It was constant and unbroken, as if he had carved it into his face with a blade. No laugh lines, no twitch of muscle, just that same immaculate grin. He didn't speak or move except to adjust his posture or sip from the water bottle tucked into the seat pocket. No one seemed to notice him, or maybe they avoided him. I tried to watch him discreetly, flipping through the in-flight magazine, sipping my coffee. Something about the smile felt alive, not friendly, more aware. Hours passed. I didn't dare sleep. I watched the cabin, noting the sleeping passengers and the occasional murmur of a child. Every time I glanced at him, the smile never faltered. I muttered one time to the flight attendant, "That man, over there, does he talk?" She glanced at him, then at me. Her expression neutral. "Sir, that's not unusual. Some people don't speak on long flights." Midnight passed. The cabin darkened, except for the dim ceiling lights and the occasional glow from the screens embedded in the seatbacks. I stared at the window, trying to distract myself, but I caught glimpses of him in the reflection, always smiling. Then I noticed something else. The shadows of the passengers around him were faint and wavering. One by one, they seemed wrong. Their faces, when illuminated by the reading lights, were pale like wax figures. One man, in a suit reading a magazine, suddenly looked like he'd fallen asleep mid-breath. But when I looked closer, I saw that his chest wasn't moving. My heart thumped. I blinked hard, but when I opened my eyes again, he was gone. Not that he had left his seat, just gone. I checked the aisle. Every passenger in sight, every seat I could see from my vantage point was empty. The child in 17C, the woman across from me reading a tablet, the elderly couple in the row behind, they had all vanished, leaving only the faint scent of perfume and the low hum of recycled air. I jumped to my feet, my hands gripping the armrests for balance. "Hello?" I called. No answer, just the steady roar of the engines and the fluorescent lights flickering. Then I saw him, sitting upright, exactly where he had been, still smiling, still silent. I stumbled forward, my mind racing. What the hell is going on? The man didn't move or speak. His eyes met mine, and the smile widened. Not a friendly smile, not a polite smile, but a smile that seemed to stretch time itself, like it had been waiting for me. I turned toward the cockpit. The door was locked, but through the small window, the pilots were gone too. Just the dull green glow of the instrument panels. My stomach churned. My hands shook as I backed into my seat. I couldn't comprehend it. Was this a prank? A dream? The entire plane swallowed by some trick of the mind? But the smell of the cabin, the pressurized air, the vibration through the floor, it was all real. I tried to look away from him. I looked down at my hands, at my watch, at the screen in front of me. But when I lifted my gaze, he had moved several seats closer. I considered jumping from the plane through the emergency exit, but the doors were sealed, locked against some invisible force. I tried the aisle, the galley, the lavatory, each place the same, empty. The engines droned on, the cabin lights flickered, and he smiled. Eventually, the first gray light of dawn crept through the windows. The sun painted the cabin in pale gold, but still, there were no people on the plane, only him and me. Finally, I sat back, exhausted, my body trembling. I whispered to him, "Who are you? What do you want?" He leaned slightly forward, tilting his head with that same perfect smile. And for the first time, I thought I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible whisper. Not words, not speech, but a sound that pressed directly into my mind. "I've been waiting." And then the plane shuddered, the engines faltered, and the smile dissolved. I woke up in my seat hours later. Passengers were in their seats, half asleep, unaware of the emptiness that had passed. Flight attendants moved up and down the aisle. The hum of the engines was steady and comforting. I looked for him. No sign, no trace. But the feeling lingered. Every time someone smiled at me, I flinched. I could feel him somewhere out there, waiting for the next flight, the next passenger, the next moment to smile. I boarded the flight from New York to London half asleep. I fly often for work, but I'd never shaken the unease that comes with being trapped in a metal tube thousands of feet above the earth. I usually drown it out with headphones and bourbon. This time, though, I felt an extra twitch of unease before we even left the ground. The man 2 rows ahead of me, gray hoodie, black cap, kept turning his head toward the aisle, glancing around as if counting passengers. His eyes caught mine once, sharp and unblinking. I looked away. We lifted off, the roar of engines settling into a steady hum. Cabin lights dimmed as people slipped into sleep. I tried, but the man in the hoodie stood. He whispered something to a man across the aisle who nodded. I told myself I was being paranoid. My brain loves inventing disasters mid-air, but then a third man rose. This one carried a duffel bag I remembered seeing at check-in. It was oddly heavy and awkward. He reached the front, dropped it, and pulled out a gun. Gasps rippled, and a flight attendant froze mid-stride. "Stay in your seats," the man in the hoodie barked, his accent flat and unfamiliar. I gripped my armrest. This wasn't paranoia, this was happening. The hijackers worked with unnerving precision. One stayed near the cockpit door, pounding on it, yelling demands. Another walked the aisle with the gun. The third guarded the duffel bag. They were coordinated and practiced. Someone screamed, and the gunman snapped at them to shut up. Silence followed, thick and heavy except for muffled crying. Time lost meaning. The captain's voice never came. The hijackers shouted at the locked cockpit, threatening and banging, but the reinforced door held. My chest tightened at the thought. Were we safer with it locked or doomed if they managed to break in? I tried to think rationally. I'd read about these doors, designed to withstand force, but the bag, they kept glancing at it. My throat dried at the thought of what was inside. Hours crawled and my legs cramped. I kept expecting to see military jets flanking us, but when I peered through the window, there was only endless darkness. No stars, no land below, just black. It was then I realized that we weren't descending at all. By now we should have been approaching the Atlantic crossing, banking slightly. I'd taken this flight dozens of times, so my body knew the rhythm, but this time, just straight, steady flight. A strange dread began to gnaw at me. Were we even still on course? I checked my watch. Nearly 5 hours had passed. No word from the crew. No change. The man in the hoodie walked by again, eyes sweeping the cabin. The bag in the aisle shifted slightly, as though something inside had moved. Not rolled. Moved. Whispers rose around me. Other people had noticed. One passenger, a young woman, stammered something, but the gunman raised his weapon and she shrank back, trembling. I couldn't take my eyes off the bag. I thought I saw the zipper bulge outward, just for a second, like something pressed against it from inside. That was when the lights flickered. Not the usual turbulence flicker. This was a full blackout, a complete swallowing of the cabin in pitch dark for what felt like minutes. Gasps, cries, shouts. Then, light again. The bag was gone. The hijackers realized and looked around, muttering in a language I didn't know. Their fear was real. Whatever was in the bag, they hadn't expected that. The plane tilted then, a violent bank to the left. People screamed, and overhead bins popped open, belongings tumbling. I slammed against the man beside me, our shoulders locking painfully. One of the hijackers, the one by the cockpit, began pounding harder, yelling frantic words. Still no answer. Then came the first sound from the bag's absence. A scrape. Long, deliberate, under the floor. Passengers froze, every eye wide. The sound traveled, dragging itself beneath us toward the back of the plane. Then silence. The man in the hoodie aimed his gun toward the floor, as if he could shoot through it. His hands shook as the sheer terror reflected in his face. Another blackout. This one longer, and when the lights returned, 3 passengers were gone. Their seats empty, belts still buckled. No trace. The lights flickered again. This time another passenger and the hijacker at the cockpit had disappeared. A collective whimper rose from the cabin. Someone started praying. I just sat there, my mind fraying at the edges. I realized then the gun wasn't what terrified me most. It was whatever had been inside that bag. Whatever was now loose. Whatever was picking off people one by one. And then I felt it. Cold fingers brushing my ankle from beneath the seat. Flying seemed harmless. A tiny plane in a clear sky. An instructor. Simple. Exciting. Safe. How wrong I was. Harris, the instructor, had a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He shook my hand too firmly, like he was testing my grip. "You'll do fine," he said. The words sounded normal, but the tone, it was too eager, like he knew something I didn't. The plane smelled of fuel and vinyl. The metallic tang made my stomach turn, but I ignored it. We taxied to the runway. Harris gave me the usual instructions. Climb, bank, descend, keep your eyes on the horizon. I nodded, but my fingers shook on the yoke, and that's when I felt it first. A twitch in my chest, deep under my sternum, and a faint whisper. At first it was faint. I thought it was just nerves. But the whisper grew, sliding into my brain like oil seeping under a door.
Look down. See them? They are yours.
I shook my head, trying to clear it, as Harris's voice became muffled, distorted, like he was underwater. My hands twitched, pulling the yoke in directions I didn't intend. The sky began to warp, and colors twisted unnaturally. The clouds no longer drifted, they writhed like living things. I realized, with a creeping, gnawing panic, that I was no longer me. Every heartbeat and every thought was now a battlefield. My chest ached, not from fear, but from something inside trying to dominate.
They're weak. You're strong.
I tried to speak, but nothing came out. My tongue was heavy and my throat felt foreign. My fingers clenched around the controls as if they had a mind of their own. The plane dipped sharply. Harris reached for the yoke, but I felt him vanish beneath my hands, like his body was melting. His struggle was real, but he was losing. I could feel it, crawling through my veins, tendrils of shadow sliding under my skin, twisting muscle and bone. My fingers elongated, and the pain was unbearable, like a white-hot tearing inside my joints. My heartbeat became a drum, pounding in loud thuds within me. The whispers echoed like the wind inside my skull.
Look down, look down. Watch them die.
I obeyed. I looked. The town below shrank into a grotesque miniature, but the people were clear, faces twisted with their mouths open in silent terror, staring up at me. I laughed. I didn't laugh. The demon inside me laughed. My tongue flicked, tasting metal and smoke, my eyes tearing themselves in arcs of red as the demon tested my senses. I tried to scream and tried to regain control, but I moved against my will. The plane climbed sharply, then plunged. I could feel the metal body strain under forces that shouldn't exist. My bones ached, as if I were being pulled apart and stitched back together in impossible ways. My chest convulsed, lungs filled with fire, blood, ice, all at once. My stomach roared with nausea, vomiting not from sickness but from the demon reshaping me, bending me into a vessel it could inhabit. I tried to grab my throat, tried to feel my own hands, but they weren't my hands anymore. They were claws. I was nothing but a bridge, a channel, a conduit. I wanted to fight, but fighting felt like drowning in molten lead. Every movement was agony. The plane dropped suddenly, nosediving. I tried to pull up, but the demon's strength was immense. My muscles ripped and reformed under its will. My legs buckled, then straightened. My arms jerked, pulling, twisting. Pain was irrelevant. Death was irrelevant. Only the whisper mattered.
They are yours. They will scream. They will die. You are eternal.
I looked down at the town again. Faces, tiny and helpless, screaming. I felt a pleasure that made me hate myself, a joy that burned like acid in my chest. My own reflection in the cockpit glass smiled back at me, but it wasn't my face. Hollow eyes, shadowed teeth, black veins crawling under skin. I realized that I was almost gone, and only this demon remained. I, the demon, held the sky. The air trembled with my laughter. The ground trembled with my contempt. And the whispers never stopped.
Look down. Watch them die.
I do, and I will forever.